In the first episode, we stopped with the 800-year-old triptych of Chachuli. It was created during the time of David the Builder, and in his last will he decreed to give his pearls and rubies to the virgin icon of Chachuli. As we see it today, it also includes cloisonnier work from the 8th to the early 12th century. Some of the cloisonniers set in gold include pictures of the Byzantine Emperor Michael VII Ducas and his Georgian wife Maria.
As glorious and beautiful as the last two generations have been, there is a black cloud in the history of Georgia.
The Georgian sources are, not surprisingly, almost without words about Demeter's oldest son, David. Certain is only that he ruled for a very short time.
From Armenian and Orbeliani family sources we learn that David's younger brother Georgi murdered him and also suppressed David's son Demna.
It appears that Georgi and members of the Orbeli family had made a secret agreement by which David would become king and the Orbelis raised to high power. That is, in fact, what happened immediately after David's coronation.
When Georgi did not keep the agreement made with the Orbelis, a revolt against him took place in 1177, led by Demna and the Orbelis. Georgi suppressed it with great violence and had the Orbelis exiled from Georgia and their lands and property confiscated. Georgi's usurpation of power and the suppression of all opposition left a lasting shadow on him throughout his lifetime, and even on his daughter Tamara.
Georgi III was married to Burdu Khan, daughter of the Ossetian king. She probably died young, maybe at or immediately following the birth of their only child. Like his father, Georgi adopted much from the culture of Islam. One of his coins portrays him sitting cross-legged, holding a falcon in his right hand. He wears loose trousers and a jeweled tunic and a crown with pendilia.
At that time, around 1170, the cousin of the Byzantine emperor, General Andronicus, and his family first came to Georgia. He helped Georgi III conquer Derwent and was richly rewarded with lands in Kakheti. In Vardzia, we find the oldest painted picture of Tamara's father.
Larger than any other fresco, the king is shown in an overpowering size, typical of totalitarian rulers who seem to have a need to portray themselves as superhuman. There is nothing humble about this picture. He is even bigger than the Virgin and Child.
Nevertheless, the latter two are shown to welcome and bless the king. An angel above the king accepts a labarum from the Virgin and is in process of passing it to the king. The right to rule over Georgia is therefore shown to emanate from the Mother of God. Georgi wears Byzantine royal garments with heavily embroidered robes and ostentatious laurel.
His crown bears 5 large jewels. His head is glowing in a halo, painted 16 years after his death. Another picture is a fresco at David Garegi. We find him identified as Georgi, King of Kings, son of Demeter. He wears Georgian court robes and is shown receiving a scepter from an angel in a roundel at the upper right, the same motif as in Vardzia. And it may either be a copy or a continuing need to portray the divine right to rule.
In Rinzvesi, Georgi is shown praying to Christ, who is shown much smaller. At the time of the painting, he had been dead for 20 years. The king is wearing Byzantine robes and holding the labarum.
Not far from Tbilisi is the monastery of Betania, deeply hidden in a virtually inaccessible valley. In fact, it was so hidden that for centuries it had been lost even to Georgians.
Georgi's pose is identical to Rinzvesi, only the Byzantine garment is less detailed and slightly cruder. The face is definitely older. Georgi is shown praying to St. George in a very inconsistent way, otherwise not found in Georgian iconography. The saint appears to entirely disregard the king, but rather look at the audience.
Also, there's no halo. We can safely conclude that this is not an original painting from the 12th, but a restoration from the 19th century. It is astounding that we know next to nothing of the queens of George II, David IV the Builder, Demeter, David V, and George III.
Yes, but Tamara was the first woman to rule in her own right in what is known as Georgia. At Anchishkhati Church in Tbilisi, we still venerate the place where she is said to have sat in worship. In spite of all stories about her, only 5 pictures of Tamara survive to this day, only 4 of which may be original. She is never shown alone. As we will see, Tamara existed by her father and for her son. A fresco at Vardzia is the oldest picture we have of Queen Tamara.
Immediately following Georgi III is his daughter, and we are told that the female person is King of Kings of all the East, Tamar, daughter of Georgi. May God grant her a long life. She is shown crowned, which allows a dating after 1178. And as she wears no veil, we can conclude that she was unmarried at the time.
You remember the daughter of David the Builder, Katai, who married Isaac Komnenos. Well, Tamara and the children of Andronikos were therefore cousins, and she invited them to come to the estates they had been given by her father during the first 15 years before.
Of course, they did not exactly come to Georgia empty-handed. The influx of money and power must have been quite welcome to Queen Tamara.
That was probably the time when the church Amagleba was built and the frescoes painted. I think they have never been shown on television. The strength of faith manifests itself even this tiny church, which has been the hereditary mausoleum and graveyard of our family for centuries. Our love for Georgian Christianity has never faltered, not even in the most difficult times. To me, the frescoes tell a living story of more than 800 years of struggle. Not even neglect and intentional destruction could erase the power of this place.
20 years after the arrival of the family, the grandchildren of Andronikos were essential in conquering Trabzon, where they established their own kingdom and dynasty, but always in close cooperation with their cousin Tamara. Back to the Queen Tamara. In Vardzia, she is the donor of the church holding a model of it. The box-like structure illustrates the cave nature of the church. The order of windows repeat the order of the main south wall, which are now hidden behind the arches.
We are told that Georgi began the monastery and that Tamara finished it. The final donation is therefore in her hand. Her royal attributes are exact copies of her father's. She wears almost identical Byzantine royal garments with heavily embroidered robes and laurel. Just like his, her crown is heavy, manly, and bears 5 large jewels and maybe 2 diamonds. She is almost a copy of her father for all to see. Their heads are glowing in halos. Look at her title, Mepeta Mepe. That is a male term, not female. The Georgian language does have a female word, Dedopali, and there are many proofs for its use even at that time. In fact, Tamara is occasionally called by the term too. In charters and in the Kartlistrov Rebbe, the term Mepe endears her sovereignty to her male audience. Yet there are some female attributes too. She wears large, ostentatious earrings, which cause the pendili of her crown hang out farther. Her robe is more detailed in its pattern of heart designs, and it is longer than her father's, as is befitting for a woman. The heavy, gem-laden scarf is worn tightly around the neck, and the complexion of her skin is noticeably lighter when compared to her father.
On the opposite wall is shown Rati Surameli, ruler of the Lichi Mountains. A concept of equality was eagerly adopted by none less than Shota Rustaveli, our national poet, who greatly admired Tamara and wrote the following lines.
Though indeed she be a woman, still as sovereign she is begotten of God. She knows how to rule. We say not this to flatter you. We ourselves in your absence often say so. Her deeds, like radiance, are revealed bright as sunshine. The lion's whelps are equal, be they male or female.
I understand there was a lot of pressure on Tamara to choose a husband.
That's right, and the first candidate suggested to her by her wise counselor was Alexius Komnenos, one of the sons of Emperor Andronicus. But she refused him and many others, like most young girls. She did not wish to follow her counselor's advice. She wanted to choose herself. She decided on the son of a Russian ruler, Yuri Bogolubsky of Suzdal. Oh, well, that was not the right choice. It happens in the best of families. So, a few years later, she married David Soslan.
Yuri Chikovani said, both Queen Tamara and King David were descendants of King Georgi I. She, by his wife Mariam Arkruni to Bagrat IV, and the line we have described. He, by Georgi's second wife Alda of Ossetia and their son Demeter.
პროვინციული მეფე ოსეთში და ჯადარონის შვილი იყო დავით სოსლანი. და ასე ხდება, რომ ბაგრატის შთამომავალი თამარ დიდი თხოვდება დავით სოსლანზე, რომელიც იყო მისთვის.
Tamara's first husband did not easily accept the change. He twice led revolts against Tamara, which were supported by many members of the aristocracy. They even crowned him king at the Guguti Palace near Kutaisi.
Eventually, however, Tamara had Yuri banished from Georgium.
Which takes us to the second Tamara picture, in the David Gareci desert of eastern Georgia, a cave church similar to Vardzia. It is a family scene of three figures, of two adults and a child under a single arch, all dressed up and very important. All wear Byzantine clothes, and, very unusual, all three, even the child, carry a labara. This is particularly important to note, as all four ancestors, Bagrat IV, David the Builder, Demeter, and Georgi III, are shown in Georgian costumes on the north wall.
Tamara is no longer dependent on her father. She has found reinforcement from a strong military leader.
David Soslan had been brought up at the Georgian court by Tamara's aunt Rusudan. He therefore knew the country and its politics well. Tamara retained real political power. In a charter, David is merely named as Mepe, while she is registered as, by the will of God, Tamar Bagratunyani, King and Queen of the Abkhazetians, Kartlians, Ranians, Kakhetians, and Armenians, Sharvanshah and Shahanshah, ruler of all the East and the West.
Tamara might have had some problems conceiving a child in the beginning. She failed to get pregnant from her first husband, and even with David Soslan, it took 5 years until Georgi Lasha was born.
The postcard-like portrayal in a family picture like this had never before been done in Georgia. At first sight, the appearance of their child Georgi Lasha holding a labara and appearing to be a king already may be puzzling. This was done to demonstrate that the succession was already set. Tamara remembered well the problems her father had, and she wanted to assure the public that the succession to her son was to be considered an accomplished fact. The fresco art critic Zaza Sritladze explains to us in an interview, Tamar, David, and child are shown in Byzantine costumes, expensive, with gold embroidered, very typical for that period of time. The pictures are badly damaged. Only a little is left of Tamara's face. It was damaged at the beginning of the 20th century. We know that because it was last copied in 1910. She has two halos. All these figures are framed by an arch.
Hey Hans, there is a person missing in the family picture.
Who would that be?
Tamara actually had another child, a daughter named Rusudan, who was born 1 year after Lasha.
I think this is a picture of the ruling family, and Tamara probably had no doubt that only her son would succeed her. She could not foresee that her daughter Rusudan would rule the country for nearly 23 years in some of the most difficult times of Georgian history. Yuri Chikovani tells us Tamara's second husband, David Soslan, had two children, Georgi Lasha, who was king from 1210, and Rusudan, who married a sultan's son. Now let's go to the third Tamara picture in Chinquisi.
There is Tamara next to her father again. Behind her is her son Lasha, who by now has grown a lot, being just about the same size as his mother. Sadly, Tamara's and Lasha's pictures have been badly damaged by water. One can still tell, however, that Tamara is wearing Byzantine robes, like her father, while Georgi Lasha wears Georgian garments. In this three-generation picture, only the long-deceased King Georgi is carrying the labarum.
The fourth Tamara picture is found in Bitania. We have dealt with this fresh-looking picture before and need to remember that it most probably does not date from the times close to her rule, but rather from the mid-1800s. The royal panel, as we see it today, is basically identical to the one in Chinquisi, which may have served as a model during the restoration.
Lasha, being obviously a little older, symbolically speaking, he still has no beard, but now carries a crown and sword. The inscription for Tamara reads, King and Queen of Queens. This is quite different from the previous King of Kings in the other churches.
The fifth and final picture of Tamara is found in Berdubani, which is part of the David Gareji complex, but now located in Azerbaijan. As they were seriously threatened by geological damage and vandalism, they were cut out and are preserved in the Tbilisi Museum of Fine Arts.
It is the only picture showing Tamara without her father or husband, but as queen with her son. The two are raising their hands in supplication to the Virgin and Christ, who have raised their hands in turn in benediction.
Georgi Lasha has matured to a grown man now and is of the same size as his mother. He has definite manly facial features. His face is accentuated by a beard. He wears a full crown, which seems to elongate his head yet again. Tamara is shown with her characteristic oval-shaped face. Her crown is large and plump, almost heavy. And of course, she is dressed in Byzantine garments.
What do you mean with characteristic oval-shaped face? All the pictures I ever see of Tamara show a long face.
Nana, let us look again at the 4 or 5 pictures of Queen Tamara. They cover the time from when she was maybe around 20 until her 40s. The Vardzia fresco from 1185, the David Gareggi fresco from about 1200, the Cinquisi from 1207, and the Bertubani fresco from about 1213. You notice that her physical appearance remained timeless and unchanged?
Well, but she wore a different attire and crown in every picture.
For the first time in my life, I'm speechless. For comparison, though, let us look at her father, Georgi III. On the 1150s coin, he is the youthful Islamic hunter. On the Vardzia fresco of 1185, the uncompromising, huge dictator who thwarts all enemies, and in the 1200 David Gareggi fresco, an older man. In the 1207 Cinquisi picture, the frail, maybe even ill, older man. And if we wish to accept the restored picture of Betania, the old white-haired man, there is a huge amount of change in his portrayals.
It just means that he aged more. Tamara was timeless, like all of us women.
Yeah, right. In Georgi Lasha, we can see real human growth. In the David Gareggi picture of 1200, he's a child. In the Cinquisi picture, he's an adolescent. In Betania, he's a late adolescent. And finally, in Bertubani of 1213, he is fully grown, bearded, with sword and a crown. From about age 8 until age 19, we have a set of pictures showing the growth of a fine young man, as is found in every family album.
Good-looking guy, I agree. Look at the size of that sword.
Nana, let's talk about literature. During her lifetime, and immediately thereafter, a regular cult developed around Tamara.
Several texts deal with her extensively. To name a few, Kartlis Tchovreba, Ioannis Shavtelis poem Abdul Mesir, Shota Rustaveli Vepris Traosani. I will read you two poems about her by Chakrukhadze.
ვინაშვენებდნენ სულთ აშენებდნენ სამონოდ მოგცენ ერთ უფლებულად ბნელი თუ უყო ელვოდ განუყო მაშინც არ ითქმი დაბნელებულად მე თუ ვსტიროდე ვიზღავ ვსტიროდე თუ არ შენ გჭვრეთდე დადუმებულად დავით მხნე ბრძენი რომელსა ზენი ხდათ ყოფენ ზესთა წარჩინებულად ისვრის ის არსა ვიტყვი ის არსა ეფრემის ძირთა აღმორჩებულად, ვინ ხმრლითა ბადრობს უშიშ უკადრობს, მტერთა სრვისათვის აღმართებულად, რომლისაც ზემან უბინდოთ მზემან, ლაშაყე გიმზო წარმართებულად, ვიტყვი მას მზესა, ვინ განუწესა, ღმერთსა ღმრთისაებრ შეყვარებულად, ზესა სანდომსა, ვახტანგის ტომსა, რომელ ენატრა მისად სწრებულსა, ვითა იწადა, რა დაიბადა, სპარსთა სიმაღლე, ცა თადებულად. თამარ მეფესა, ტერთ სისხლჩქეფესა, უკვდავთ წყაროსა ცის სამყაროსა, სხვათა მძლეველსა თვით უძლეველსა, კისკასად მქცევსა ტანად საროსა, მზეთ სახოვანსა, თვით ახოვანსა, ერთგულთა ხსნილ ყოფს, ტერთ ესაროსა, მხნედ მისთვის ვიყო, სული განვიყო, უფალსა ჩემსა, რამც გამყაროსა.
It is a wonder that we do not know where exactly she was buried. It contributes towards her mystification. Georgia had reached its largest territorial extension in history. The realm she handed to her son was far larger and more powerful than the one of her great-grandfather David the Builder. In addition to the Georgian lands, which had been accumulated during the past 12 generations, she ruled over much of Armenia, Azerbaijan, and she held Arab and Turk emirates in suzerainty.
Georgi IV Lasha, who led the country for 10 years from 1213 until 23, is always shown through Tamara. We have already seen the surviving pictures in David Garegi, Bertubani, and maybe Betania. On coins, he is identified as son of Tamar. Georgi Lasha was killed in action by the Mongols, defending his homeland against an overwhelming force. Victory was not his.
Queen and Mother Tamara had fought so hard to have herself accepted in a man's world, yet she left no noticeable preparation for her daughter to succeed in it. Upon the death of her brother, she ruled a much smaller Georgia for nearly 23 years. On her coins, she used her initials of Rusudan.
The Turkish and Mongol invasions largely destroyed the country and left the country fallen back into the Dark Ages. In 1283, an earthquake destroyed a large part of Vardzia, but the church and its paintings survived. The monasteries of David Garegi have largely collapsed. For a long time, the churches were used for strange and unreligious purposes.
Nana, we have seen so much and my head is spinning. I need to ask you something else.
Yeah?
I've been traveling from Windsor Castle to the airport and then to Tbilisi and now through nearly half a millennium of Georgian history. Can we go home and I can shave and take a bath?
Well, I hope you enjoyed this medieval excursion. At the beginning of the new millennium, all that remains are a handful of pictures of our medieval royal picture album. Most of them have been destroyed on one of the many wars that ravaged our country. But no matter what happens, the sun will always shine over the mountains of my homeland, Georgia. It is a time-honored custom in Georgia. Every time friends and family get together to reserve one special toast for the ancestors. From a film made several years ago, I show here my father, Bijigo, as he offers these traditional toasts.
ამ გადაცემის სპონსორები არიან Daimler Chrysler, მსოფლიოში Mercedes-Benz-ის და სხვა საუკეთესო მანქანების მწარმოებელი. საქართველოს ღვინისა და ალკოჰოლური სასმელების კომპანია, საუკეთესო ქართული ღვინოების მწარმოებელი.
Austrian Airlines, the most friendly airline.